Why do we suffer? There doesn't exist a human being on planet Earth that doesn't suffer a lot. We all suffer. We all suffer. We all feel pain. This exile is already 2,000 years long. We are pained that Jerusalem has been destroyed. Jerusalem hasn't been rebuilt. That temple hasn't been rebuilt. But also in our personal lives, we suffer so much. Why do we suffer? Let's look at what the Parsha says this week. So if we look at the Parsha, we learn this week that the Jewish people are in exile. Right? The Jews are in exile. Moses is sent to take them out. By the way, last week, Joseph was the viceroy of Egypt. Last week, Joseph was the most powerful person in the world, probably arguably the most powerful Jew to ever live. And the Jews were in control of the government. Literally from one parsha to the next. This week, suddenly, Pharaoh wakes up and he says, we need to take care of the Jewish problem. Literally, that's how fast it happens. From one parsha last week where the Jews were on top of the world to this parsha this week where the Jews are slaves. Literally, they are slaves. So Moses is sent now at the end of the exile. That's how fast things progress. The Jews have been suffering. They've been slaves for 210 years, of which the last 86 years have been the most terrible, terrible, terrible and hardest for them. And Moses is now sent by God to take the Jews out of Egypt. So Moses is at the burning bush. He gives every excuse in the book why he cannot be the leader. He stutters, he suffers, whatever, all the excuses in the books he gives why he cannot take the Jews out of Egypt. Let's look at just one of his excuses. So right over here on the screen in front of you, you have it. Moses says to God, verse number 13. Okay, Vayomer Moshe Elohim. Moses says to God, Hine Elohi ba'al b'nei Yisrael. I'm going to come to the Jewish people. Ve'amarti lehem, and I'm going to tell them, God of your fathers has sent me to take you out of Egypt. What are the Jews going to say? What is God's name? Ma omar alehem. What am I going to tell them? And God responds in verse number 14. God says to Moses, my name is Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh, I will be that I will be. So should you say to the Jewish people, Eheyeh Shlachani Alechem, Eheyeh sent me. And then in verse 15, he says the same thing. Question is, what in the world is going on over here? What did Moses mean to say when he said, I'm going to come to the Jewish people and I'm going to tell them, let's get out of here? And then you're going to say, no. Before we get out of here, we want to know God's name. Can you imagine? If you're in Siberia, you're in a dungeon, you're in any prison in the world, and somebody comes to take you out of prison, and he says to you, I've been sent by Mr. X to take you out. Come out with me now. Are you going to ask him 1 second, before I go out, before I leave Siberia, before I leave my dungeon, before I leave my prison, I want to know what the name of the person is? What? Why in the world would the Jews ask what's God's name, number one? And let's say for some strange reason the Jews would ask what's God's name. What does Moses say? What should I answer them, he says to God. What? Moses didn't know God's name? We know that Moses, when he was a youngster, he went out one day and he sees an Egyptian trying to kill a Jew. So what he did was he uttered God's 72-letter name, which nobody knows today, right? From the time of the temple, nobody knows his name. He uttered this powerful Kabbalistic name and the Egyptian dropped dead. So Moses obviously knew God's name. What does it mean he doesn't know God's name? And it's here that Moses asks the mother of all questions, why do we suffer? You look at the events unfolding this year into 2021 and you see that people suffer. There's a lot of pain in the world, a lot of illness, a lot of suffering. People are really, really, really suffering. And it's here that Moses asked God, the mother of all questions, why do we suffer? Let me explain. You see, what is God's name? God has many names. He has the name of Havaya, Shakai, Tzvakot, many names. God, explains the Kabbalist, is called by his actions. So when he's acting kindly, he's called Havaya. When he's waging a war, he's called by the name Tzvakot. When he is being strict, he is called by the name Elohim. Depending on what God is doing, that is what his name is. So what is God's name? Depends on what he's doing. Moses says, I'm going to come to the Jewish people and I'm going to tell them that after 210 years of suffering, God has come to redeem you. They're going to say, what's his name? They're going to say, Pharaoh, according to the Medrash, is taking 150 Jewish children in the morning, slaughtering them and bathing in their blood. Because Pharaoh had leprosy and his doctors recommended that he should bathe in Jewish blood. And at night, he would do the same thing, slaughter another 150 Jewish children. If the Jews wouldn't put the quota of bricks allotted to them, the Egyptians would take a Jewish child, a baby, and put him instead of the bricks. The Jewish firstborns were thrown into the Nile. The Jewish slaves were tortured and whipped. And it was backbreaking slave labor. They were dying and dying and dying. So after such pain and suffering, indescribable suffering, when Moses would come to the Jewish nation and say, God has sent me to take you out, they're going to say, what's his name? Like, what kind of God? He certainly wasn't acting kindly, but was he acting severely during the last 210 years? Because what kind of God would let his beloved children suffer so badly? Was he the worst monstrous kind of father? Would never allow his children to suffer so deeply. So the Jewish people would say, what kind of God is this? What's his name means? Why do we suffer? And Moses says, I don't know what to tell them because I don't know the answer either. In fact, when Moses did come to Pharaoh, he comes screaming back to God and he says, why have you done badly to this nation? Why do you deal so unkindly to the Jews? He screams at God. It's the mother of all questions right here in this week's parsha, the question that has been asked by so many Jewish leaders, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, King David, all the Jewish leaders asked this question: why do we suffer so horribly? The Lubavitcher Rebbe at Fabrengen used to cry many times at the length of the exile. Why are we suffering? Why, God, do you need another sacrifice and another sacrifice? The Rebbe said after a woman was murdered in the 1990s, murdered in front of her children, the Rebbe was crying. And he says, why do you need another sacrifice and another moment in exile and another moment? Crying, crying, crying. So what does God answer? We know the question, right? The question we know and we feel all the time. But what does God answer? Look what it says in verse 14. God says, Vayomer Elokim el Moshe. God says to Moses, tell the Jewish people, my name is Eheyeh. Eheyeh means the following. Certain things the human mind is not capable of understanding. There is no chance, no way, that while you are living in a physical body, will you ever be able to understand why you have to suffer. Why do the events of 2020, 2021 have to unfold in such a way you will never be able to understand? But one thing I can promise you, says God, and that promise was 4,000 years ago and extends all the way till January 7, 2021. God says, I promise you, I am there with you. My name is Eheyeh. Do not think for one moment that I am vacationing in the Bahamas or Mexico now while COVID-19 is rampaging across the universe. I am there feeling your pain. Every time your loved one dies or is sick or is ill, I am there with you. Every time Pharaoh takes a Jewish child and slaughters him and bathes in his blood, I feel his pain and the mother's pain. Every time a Jewish child is thrown into the Nile River, I feel the pain. I am with you in your suffering. There doesn't exist a human being in this universe who doesn't experience pain and suffering. And God says, I am there with you. I feel your pain. Shchinta begaluta, the Shechina is in exile. Imo anochi betzara, I am with you in your exile, in your pain. Why must it happen? You will never be able to understand until the day you leave your body and your soul goes up. Then you will see the truth. Then you will be able to see past the falsehoods of this world. You will be able to see that this world is all a lie, full of lies. You'll be able to see the truth then. But until that moment, I want to promise you that Eheyeh, that I am there with you, and I feel your pain. I feel your suffering. I hear you. I am with you. Let us all say l'chaim. Say l'chaim. We don't drink a lot, but we drink just a little bit. Yiddishkeit and Judaism, we need a drink. I don't have a cup here, so I'm going to drink from here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dbaro. L'chaim, to life.